"Go ahead," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "If you can fix this server, I'll hire you." Laughter rippled through the room. Sharp, quick, merciless. Dozens of employees stood around the long conference table, watching the young technician clutch a flash drive like it was the last piece of dignity he had left. The CEO leaned against the polished surface, arms crossed, perfectly composed in her power. She didn't even try to hide her amusement. He said nothing. Just walked toward the dead server, the one that had crashed during her big presentation. The smell of burnt circuits still hung faintly in the air. Everyone knew it was hopeless. An expensive piece of hardware fried beyond repair. But she'd made it a show, turning his interview into entertainment. "Take your time," she said, smirking. "We could all use a laugh." He crouched beside the machine, hands steady, eyes calm. The jokes continued behind him, little whispers, soft chuckles. He heard every one, but they didn't touch him. Not anymore. This wasn't the first time someone mistook humility for weakness. He examined the ports, the power flow, the code lines flashing red on the external monitor. Something didn't add up. A missing loop, maybe a manual override gone wrong. His mind moved faster than his pride could. Minutes stretched. The room quieted. A faint click. The fans stirred once, then silence again. The CEO tilted her head. "Done already?" He looked up, met her eyes. "Not yet," he said softly. For a moment something in his tone silenced the crowd. He wasn't defiant, just certain, like someone who'd seen worse failures than this. And then, another click. A steady hum rose from the machine. Lights blinked green, one after another. The room froze. The CEO's smile faltered. Her voice caught in her throat. He stood, dusted his hands and said quietly, "You said if I fixed it you'd hire me." No one laughed this time. And beneath her flawless composure she felt the first crack in her control. But this was only the beginning of the story she would never forget. From where are you watching around the world? Let me know in the comments below. Naveen woke before sunrise, not because an alarm told him to, but because habit had carved its own clock inside him. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and sat up on the thin cot beside his workbench. The faint buzz of an old ceiling fan mixed with the softer hum of machines that never truly rested. A broken monitor glowed faint blue on the table, half alive, half gone, just like most things in his life. He reached for a rag and wiped dust from a row of screwdrivers lined like soldiers on parade. Each one was marked with scratches, a quiet record of every repair job that had paid a bill or bought his sister's textbooks. He wasn't proud of what he had. He was proud that it still worked. "Tea," Mira said from behind him, setting a chipped cup on the bench. Her hair was tied back, her eyes half awake but kind. "You didn't sleep again." He gave a small smile. "I tried, my head didn't agree." She leaned against the doorframe, studying him. "Still thinking about yesterday?" He didn't answer right away. The memory of that room, the laughter, the CEO's voice, the heat in his chest when the server came back to life, flashed behind his eyes. He stirred his tea instead. "I fixed it," he said quietly. "But I don't think that's what she saw." What did she see? A joke that ruined her morning. Mira frowned, then stopped giving them the satisfaction. "You have nothing to prove." He smiled again, a little softer this time. "Maybe not, but I keep proving it anyway." That was the pattern of his life, working hard in places that never looked at him twice. After their parents' accident, the world had given him two choices: complain or continue. He'd chosen the second. He left engineering school, took over the rent, and began fixing whatever came through the door. A coffee machine one day, a government printer the next. People came because he was cheap, stayed because he was good, and left because they forgot his name. Still, there was peace in his workshop. The walls were lined with mismatched shelves, each filled with fragments of old lives, keyboards missing letters, routers with burned circuits, fans that still turned but no longer cooled. He liked them. They reminded him of people unreliable but redeemable. On a dusty corner sat a framed photo of his mentor, Professor Rao. The old man's smile was crooked, the kind that hid both wisdom and worry. Naveen picked up the frame and ran his thumb across the glass. Raso had once told him, "A machine doesn't fail because it's weak. It fails because someone stopped caring to understand it." Naveen had lived by that line long after the professor was gone. He still remembered the day Rao lost everything. A corporate partnership gone sour, an accusation of stolen code, and within weeks a reputation destroyed. The company that had buried him, Clyratech Systems, was now one of the country's biggest tech firms. The same company that CEO, Mira Verma ruled with her famous cold precision. Naveen had visited Rao once after the scandal. The old man's office had smelled of solder and despair. They took the work, not the worth, Rao had said, coughing into a handkerchief. You can't steal integrity. It either lives in you or it doesn't. A month later, he was gone. Those words became a compass in Naveen's chest. He didn't want revenge. He wanted to live in a way that proved Rao right. When Mira left for her morning shift at the hospital, he sat alone and opened his cracked phone. Notifications blinked. Unpaid bills, pending repairs. One unread message from a school asking him to fix their lab PCs. He sighed and scrolled. A job post caught his eye. Systems maintenance engineer, Clyra Tech Systems. For a moment he thought it was a mistake. The same company, the same logo that had appeared on Rao's resignation letter. His thumb hovered over the apply button. Logic told him to ignore it. Pride told him to too. But something older than pride, something like duty, pushed him forward. He opened his folder of documents. His resume was plain. No degree, no formal experience. Just lines of freelance work, small projects, and a note at the bottom, independent systems consultant, specializing in legacy recovery. It sounded better than guy who fixes things no one else wants to touch. He attached it anyway, wrote a brief message, available immediately, will work any hours, and sent it. The email disappeared into the void of the internet, and with it a small piece of his patience. He turned back to the workshop and kept working. Time passed in the rhythm of screws turning, wires connecting, fans whirring. Around noon, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He wiped his hands and Mr. Naveen, a voice said crisply. This is HR from Clyra Tech Systems. The CEO would like to meet you tomorrow morning for an evaluation. He almost laughed. The CEO herself? Yes. She's overseeing technical candidates personally this week. Bring your tools. When the call ended, he stood motionless. The hum of machines filled the silence, low and steady, like applause from ghosts. He glanced again at Rao's photo. Looks like they're giving me a front row seat, he murmured. That night, he cleaned his toolkit as if it were armor. He tightened every hinge, labeled every cable, packed the screwdriver set he'd inherited from Rao. On the workbench lay Mira's note, scrawled in blue ink. Don't let them talk to you like you're He folded it and slipped it into his wallet. Before turning off the lights, he looked once more at the shelves of half-broken devices. They weren't trophies. They were reminders that nothing was ever too damaged to begin again. He hoped the same applied to people. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the metal shutters. Inside, he whispered to himself, half a prayer, half a promise. Tomorrow, I'll walk into their world, but I'll walk in as... And as the night pressed in around his little workshop, the quiet hum of those old machines seemed to answer back, steady and alive, like they knew the world was about to notice the man it had overlooked for far too long. The call came late in the afternoon, just as Naveen was packing away his tools. Mr. Naveen, the voice said briskly, this is HR from Clyra Tech. The CEO herself would like you to attend a technical evaluation tomorrow at 9 a.m. He blinked. Tomorrow? Yes, sir, it's a special session. Bring your own toolkit. Before he could ask another question, the line went dead. He stood there for a long moment, screwdriver still in hand. It had been years since anyone at a major company called him sir. That night, he barely slept. Every possible outcome ran through his mind. The chance to finally prove himself. The risk of walking straight into humiliation again. By dawn he was up, dressed in his cleanest shirt, toolkit strapped to his shoulder. Mira wished him luck and pressed a folded note into his palm. Just 2 words. Stand tall. The Clyra Tech lobby was a sea of glass and confidence. Employees glided past him in tailored suits and ID cards that caught the light like medals. Naveen felt invisible, a man made of grease and wire in a place built for presentation. The receptionist eyed his old backpack before handing him a visitor badge. You'll be in the executive conference room, she said. Top floor. Top floor, of course, where power lived. A young assistant escorted him up. The elevator hummed, floor numbers blinking upward like a countdown. They're all waiting, the assistant said, smiling a little too brightly. When the doors opened, he stepped into a room full of people already turned toward him. The CEO, Mira Verma, stood at the center, sharp suit, sharper expression. Beside her were 2 engineers, a few interns, and behind a pane of tinted glass, silhouettes he recognized as more staff watching from the next room. It wasn't an interview, it was an audience. Mr. Naveen, Mira said smoothly, you come highly recommended by our HR system. The pause before recommended made it sound like an insult. He nodded. Thank you for the opportunity. She gestured to the large server rack beside her, its indicator lights completely dead. We had a bit of a disaster this morning. This mainframe handles half our client data. Our best people can't get it running. So I thought, why not see what our guest can do? Laughter rippled through the room. Naveen's stomach tightened. Mira folded her arms. If you can fix this, I'll hire you. Her tone made it clear. It wasn't an offer, it was a joke. He set his toolkit down without replying. The machine towered above him, newer than anything he'd handled, yet familiar in its silence. He noticed missing panels, loose cables, even a few ports deliberately unplugged. A test, yes, but not of skill, of humiliation. He crouched beside the console, steadying his breath. Somewhere beyond the glass, people whispered, waiting for him to fail. He opened the casing. One glance told him everything. Power surge damage, firmware corruption, and a deliberate missing drive. He could almost hear Rao's voice in his head. A machine never lies. Only people do. He began with the basics, tracing circuits with a small penlight. His movements were deliberate, patient. He swapped connectors, bypassed a relay, then pulled a tiny jumper cable from his pocket. Every motion drew another chuckle from the room. Creative approach, one of the engineers muttered, half mocking. Mira smiled thinly. Improvisation is admirable in street repairs. Naveen didn't look up. Improvisation built this entire industry, he said quietly. That line caught the IT director's attention, a woman in her 40s, with calm eyes and the posture of someone who'd seen too many power games. She leaned forward, curious. Minutes passed. The screen still glowed blank. Sweat traced a line down Naveen's temple, but his hands stayed steady. He connected the jumper, tapped a command on the auxiliary board, and waited. A faint click. Nothing. Then another. A small fan started spinning almost shyly. The laughter dimmed. He reached for his flash drive, one loaded with diagnostic scripts he'd written himself. Plugged it in, typed a few quick commands. Lines of code began scrolling across the monitor. Green alive. The IT director's eyes widened. He's bypassing the kernel lock manually, she whispered. Mira's smile thinned. Impossible. That system's proprietary. A final command. The overhead lights flickered as the main server came to life. Fans whirring, status lights glowing, a steady green. The noise filled the room like applause. Silence followed. Thick, disbelieving silence. Naveen stood slowly, wiping his hands on his shirt. Done, he said simply. For a moment, no one moved. Then the IT director started clapping once, twice before the sound caught on with a few hesitant others. Mira didn't join them. She just stared at the machine as if it had betrayed her. He turned to her. You said if I fixed it you'd hire me. Her lips twitched, part smile, part threat. We'll review the footage. He met her gaze without blinking. You won't need to. It's fixed. She looked away first. The IT director approached him quietly. That was remarkable, she said under her breath. How did you understand it? He finished. I listened. He packed his tools slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on him. Somewhere deep inside, pride stirred, but it wasn't arrogance. It was relief. For once skill had spoken louder than status. As he left the room he caught Mira's reflection in the glass wall. Her smile had vanished, replaced by something sharper, fear, maybe, or recognition. The kind that comes when power realizes it's not invincible. In the elevator down, he exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. His hands still trembled, not from nerves but from the echo of restraint. He had walked into their test and changed the rules without raising his voice, but he also knew something had shifted in her eyes, something that would not stay quiet for long. The server was fixed. But the real system, the one that valued arrogance over integrity, was just beginning to break. The hum of the server filled the room like a heartbeat. Green lights flickered across its surface, weak at first, then steady. Naveen's code was working, stabilizing the power flow line by line. The temperature gauge dipped back to normal, and the system interface began to crawl alive, one cautious prompt at a time. He barely noticed the murmurs behind him. A few employees leaned closer, whispering to each other. Even the IT director had stepped forward now, drawn by what she was seeing. Mira Verma stood motionless, arms crossed, a faint smile frozen on her lips. The hum grew stronger. A soft chime confirmed reboot initialization. Naveen leaned closer to the monitor, fingers flying. He was in the middle of restoring the second partition when the entire system flickered. Just once, like a heartbeat skipped and then froze. His eyes narrowed. Power fluctuation. External. He turned to the main breaker panel on the wall. Its switch had been tripped. The lights went out on the server. Fans stopped. Silence. He blinked once, slowly. Someone cut the power, he said. Mira's heels clicked as she stepped forward. So it failed. The IT director looked up sharply. Wait. He was mid-process. Mira raised a hand. No need to make excuses. The demonstration's over. A cold, polite chuckle spread through the crowd. Naveen turned toward her, still crouched beside the now dead machine. You turned it off, he said quietly. I ensured safety, she replied. You were tampering with proprietary systems without clearance. He straightened up, confusion flickering into disbelief. You asked me to fix it. Her tone hardened. And you didn't. Guesswork doesn't qualify as repair. A few staff members glanced away, uneasy. The IT director's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Mira stepped closer, lowering her voice enough that only he could hear. This company doesn't reward street mechanics pretending to be engineers. The words hit harder than the laughter. Not because they surprised him, but because they sounded too familiar. The same words his old professors had thrown at Rayo before his fall. He took a slow breath, forcing calm into his voice. If you restore power, the system will finish booting. It's already repaired. She tilted her head. Oh? And we're supposed to take your word for it. Take the servers, he said simply. Her eyes flashed. Then she turned to security. Escort him out. We'll run diagnostics ourselves. The guards hesitated, unsure. One of them, a younger man, looked at Naveen with a trace of sympathy. But orders were orders. As they approached, Naveen packed his tools methodically, as though still in control. The IT director tried to interject. Mira, at least let him finish. Enough. Asha, Mira snapped, turning to her. You're too trusting. That's why our systems fail in the first place. Naveen's chest tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Sometimes systems fail because people don't listen. The laughter resumed, nervous this time. He was guided toward the door. He didn't resist, just glanced once more at the dead server, and that's when he noticed it. On the upper corner of the interface, half hidden under the diagnostic window, was a small tag, a sig of letters embedded deep in the code, RAO 01 Beta. His breath caught. He knew that signature. He'd seen it years ago in his mentor's drafts, the unfinished prototype they'd built together before Clyratech stole it. It shouldn't be there. It couldn't be there, unless the company was still using Rayo's stolen architecture. Before he could say anything, the guards ushered him through the door. The last thing he saw as it closed behind him was Mira standing before the dead machine, smiling for the audience again. Let this be a reminder, she said. Confidence doesn't equal competence. The elevator ride down was silent. One guard cleared his throat. Sorry, sir. Orders. Naveen nodded faintly. You're just doing your job. Outside, the city heat pressed against him. He walked until the corporate glass towers thinned into quieter streets, until laughter from the upper floors was replaced by the chatter of food stalls and auto horns. Only then did he stop, gripping the strap of his bag. His chest burned, not from anger but from something sharper, deeper. He had fixed that machine. He knew he had, and she knew it too. But power never needed proof. It only needed performance. He reached a bench outside an electronics shop and sat, pulling out his small diagnostic drive. He plugged it into his phone and scrolled through cached command logs. The last saved entry blinked at him. Reboot successful, no A1 beta patch active. There it was. Proof of what she'd tried to bury. He leaned back, closing his eyes. The humiliation still stung. The laughter, the dismissal, the quiet triumph turned to dust. But beneath it something steadier was forming. He would find out why that code still existed, why her company was hiding his mentor's work, and when he did, it wouldn't be through anger or revenge. It would be through truth. As the sun dipped low, painting the street in orange, Naveen rose again. He wiped his hands on his jeans and began walking home. Each step felt heavier, but sure. By the time he reached his lane, his sister's note had slipped halfway out of his wallet. The corner of it peeked through. Stand tall. He smiled bitterly. I will, he whispered. In the distance, the city lights flickered like tiny servers waking in the dark, each one alive, each one waiting for someone patient enough to make it work again. He had no job, no title, no applause, but he had something more dangerous to the powerful: clarity. And clarity, he knew, was the first step toward change. The house was quiet when Naveen returned that evening. No sound of fans, no clatter of tools, just silence, the kind that waits for someone to admit defeat. He dropped his bag by the door and sat on the small wooden chair beside his workbench. The faint smell of solder still lingered, mixed with the faint sweetness of Mira's tea from that morning. Everything looked the same, but he didn't. He replayed the day in fragments. The CEO's smirk, the laughter, the way the power had gone off just when the machine was about to prove him right. Every look, every whisper, looped in his head like a corrupted file he couldn't delete. Mira's footsteps broke the stillness. "You're home early." He didn't look up. "They ended the test early." She hesitated, sensing the weight behind his words. "So, they called it a failure." For a second she didn't speak. Then she said softly, "You fixed it, didn't you?" He nodded once. "Yes. And that's what made it fail." She walked over and sat across from him. "You did your best, Nav. You can't let their arrogance define you." He rubbed his palms together, staring at the faint oil stains. "It's not their arrogance that's bothering me. It's what I saw before they shut it down." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "There was a code string in the system. RAW-01 beta." Mira frowned, trying to remember. "RAW as in your professor." He nodded again. That was his unfinished project, the one they accused him of stealing from them. But that code, it was his. He never released it publicly. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Mira spoke carefully. "Are you sure it wasn't just coincidence?" He shook his head. "No one uses that label format." It was his signature. He stood up, pacing the small room. "They've been using his design all along, Mira. The same system they fired him for. They took it, changed the logo and built their empire on it." She stared at him, eyes wide. "Then you have to tell someone." He laughed bitterly. "Who? Them? The same people who cut the power to win an argument. No one will listen." She got up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then make them listen. You always said machines don't lie. Prove it." He looked at her, the exhaustion in his face softening into something quieter, resolve. After she went to bed, he sat back down at the bench and powered up his old desktop. The screen flickered to life, faint lines cutting through the image. He connected his flash drive and pulled up the cached logs from the test. There it was, the reboot command, time-stamped just before the power cut, and beneath it the code fragment that shouldn't exist. He opened it, line by line. RAW's code had always carried a unique rhythm, compact loops, minimal redundancy, written with the elegance of someone who understood both math and mercy. He recognized it instantly. The deeper he read, the more the truth burned. The Clyra Tech's proprietary architecture was built directly from RAW's prototype, his late mentor's life work buried under corporate branding and copyright claims. Every memory of RAW came flooding back. The man's soft-spoken patience. The day he'd said integrity will never make you rich, but it will make you free. Naveen had smiled at that once. Tonight it felt like prophecy. He printed the log files, each one marked with Clyra Tech's internal serial numbers. Then he dug through an old box of papers until he found the handwritten schematics Rayo had given him years ago. Torn edges, faded ink, but still readable. He placed them side by side. The resemblance was undeniable. Rayo's truth lived inside their machines. He leaned back, staring at the document spread across his workbench. His hands were trembling, not from fear but from the clarity of purpose. This wasn't about pride anymore. It wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about justice for a man who died believing he was a thief. He whispered to the empty room. "You were right, sir. They stole the work, not the worth." The printer hummed again as he made copies. He slipped them into a folder labeled RAW Legacy, then sealed it inside a waterproof bag. He didn't know yet what he would do with it. He knew this. It wouldn't stay hidden. Outside, the city was dark except for the flicker of neon lights reflecting through the window. He stared at them for a long time. Somewhere behind those towers sat Mira Verma, untouchable, smug, certain of her control. But she didn't know the system had spoken. When he finally turned off the monitor, dawn was already creeping in. The machines around him whirred softly, like witnesses to a quiet oath. He cleaned the table, placed the folder neatly in a drawer, and whispered into the dim room, "I won't fight her with noise, I'll fight her with truth." And for the first time since that humiliating meeting, he felt something shift inside him. Not rage, not bitterness, but calm determination. The kind that doesn't burn out. The kind that waits. The kind that wins. 3 days passed before his phone buzzed again. The number was unknown, but the tone in the message was unmistakably careful. This is Asha from Clyratech. We need to talk, privately. Naveen stared at it for a long time, the letters glowing faintly on the cracked screen. Ashay. The IT director who'd tried to defend him before the CEO shut him down. He hadn't expected to hear from anyone in that building again, especially not her. He typed one cautious reply. About what? The response came almost instantly. A network collapse. The company's in trouble. I think you can help. His first instinct was to refuse. He'd had enough humiliation for a lifetime. But something about her choice of words, "I think you can help," made him pause. It wasn't flattery, it was trust. The kind he hadn't heard in a long time. They met that evening in a small roadside cafe. The kind of place where no one looked too closely at anyone else. Asha was already seated, her face drawn but alert. She wore no corporate ID, no power suit, just a plain shawl and the uneasy posture of someone carrying too many secrets. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said quietly. He sat across from her. "I almost didn't." A faint, tired smile. "Fair. But we're in a situation, Mr. Naveen. The main network went down this morning. Critical servers, client portals, everything. It's chaos. Our backups aren't syncing and the CEO is blaming everyone except herself." He folded his hands on the table. "Why come to me? You have a whole team. They can't see past her orders." "I can." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "That system you worked on, the one she sabotaged, it was more stable under your patch than anything we've tried since. I checked the logs. You were right." The admission hung between them, fragile and heavy. He exhaled slowly. "And if she finds out you contacted me, I'll deny it," she said simply. "But if we don't fix this, hundreds of clients lose data by tomorrow morning. People's jobs will vanish. I'm not protecting her ego anymore." He studied her face. There was no deception there, only fatigue, the kind born from years of watching integrity lose to hierarchy. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help, but under one condition." "Name it." "No records, no names. I'm invisible." She nodded. "Agreed." That night, Asha arranged a secure line into the company's back-end network. Naveen worked from his old workshop, screens glowing in the dim light. He moved through the code like a surgeon, through scar tissue. Precise, patient, leaving no trace of intrusion. The issue was deeper than she'd admitted. Entire directories overridden, access privileges scrambled, load balancers failing. It wasn't just a crash. It was structural road. He sent her updates over encrypted chat. Patch the third partition. Disable the dynamic routing. Don't touch the firmware. It's self-looping. Each instruction came fast, calm, deliberate. Asha followed them without question. Within hours, parts of the network flickered back to life. Employees in the office started whispering about a ghost engineer helping from outside. A few even began to suspect the truth. Could it be that guy from the demo? One of them murmured in a hallway. The one she embarrassed? No one dared say it aloud, but the respect in their voices was unmistakable. By midnight, the data stream had stabilized. Asha leaned back in her chair at the company's control hub, exhaustion written across her face. She typed one final message. "It's working. You did it." Naveen replied only, "The system isn't the problem. The structure above it is." She smiled faintly at the screen. "You sound like a man who still believes systems can be fixed." He didn't answer. Over the next week, she kept him quietly on call. Each time another issue surfaced, a broken patch, a corrupted line, he guided her through the repair. She never revealed his name, only referred to him as Consultant X in company memos, and though the CEO remained oblivious, the staff began noticing something strange. The systems only worked on the nights Mira wasn't around. The narrative inside the building began to shift. Whispers of competence, where arrogance had ruled. Conversations about merit instead of titles. Asha noticed it too. The small changes, the subtle rebellion. One evening she messaged him again. "They're starting to ask questions. Mira's furious, but she can't find what's wrong." "That's because what's wrong isn't in the code," he typed back. "It's in the culture." There was a long pause. Then her reply, "Maybe it's time someone rewrote that too." By the end of the second week, Clyratech's crisis was nearly over. Systems restored, clients retained, data integrity confirmed. Asha had discreetly logged every patch Naveen made, evidence of his role should the truth ever need to surface. She called him late that night, her voice steadier than he'd heard before. "You know, they're starting to quote your methods in meetings." He chuckled softly, "without knowing who wrote them." "Exactly. They think it's my department's initiative. I'm letting them believe that for now. He paused, thoughtful. Let them. I'm not after credit. I know, she said. That's why you deserve it. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt less like absence, more like understanding. Two people on opposite sides of power, connected by the same quiet principle: do the right thing, even if no one applauds. As the call ended, Asha looked around the dim office, the server lights blinking steadily again. She felt something she hadn't in years: hope. And across the city, Naveen closed his laptop, leaning back in the chair that had held him through countless nights of failure and repair. The hum of the machines filled the workshop again, steady, alive, familiar. He didn't need to see her face to know what this meant. The cracks inside that company had begun to widen, not through revenge, but through competence. And while the CEO still basked in ignorance, unaware of the man who had saved her empire from collapse, a quiet revolution had already begun, one line of code at a time. The next morning the messages began again, short, urgent, respectful. Ashasha. System patch stable. Can you stay on standby? Naveen. Always. That became their rhythm. No titles, no meetings, no egos, just two minds keeping an empire from collapsing. Each night while the rest of the city slept, the lights in his small workshop glowed against the dark. Cables draped across the table like veins, carrying life back into a machine that didn't know it was being saved. Inside Claritech, the mood was shifting. People were still wary of Mira's temper, but something new was spreading through the ranks, a quiet sense that competence had returned. Asha began passing along Naveen's suggestions to the team as department recommendations. They were every time a system stabilized, she saw relief in her engineers' faces, the relief of being led by clarity instead of fear. One evening she called instead of texting. Her voice was softer than before. I can't keep pretending these ideas are mine. You're protecting both of us, he replied. I'm protecting a lie, she said. Then, after a pause, you know, when I first joined I believed Mira. I thought ruthlessness was strength. But now I see what it cost. Everyone walks around terrified of mistakes. You fix mistakes. You don't punish them. He smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. Machines don't learn through fear. Neither do people. Asha fell silent for a long moment. Tell me something, she said finally. That code you used in the reboot, the tag with Rao in it, where did it come from? He hesitated. From the man who taught me everything I know. The one they fired years ago? Yes, they stole his work. He died trying to prove his innocence. She exhaled slowly. Then you're not just repairing systems, are you? No, he said quietly. I'm repairing what they broke in him. Days turned into weeks. Through Asha's quiet coordination, Naveen began mentoring junior engineers remotely under the guise of external consulting. He taught them how to read error logs, the way a doctor reads symptoms, how to listen for the tone of a dying hard drive, how to stay calm when systems panicked. They started calling his unseen presence the Whisperer. One night, an intern accidentally deleted a major database. Instead of panic, Asha heard one of the engineers say calmly, "Run the shadow restore." He taught us that, and it worked. Minutes later the database was whole again. No shouting, no fear, just quiet applause from exhausted people who'd begun to believe in themselves again. When Asha told him about it, he laughed softly. They don't need me, they just needed space to think. She disagreed. They needed someone to show them what leadership looks like when it isn't afraid. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Mira began sensing resistance, projects finishing ahead of schedule, teams collaborating without her permission, decisions being made lower down the chain. She called emergency meetings to remind everyone of hierarchy. The old fear didn't bite as deeply anymore. The staff nodded, smiled, and went back to doing what actually worked. Asha kept him informed. Mira's furious, but she can't stop progress without admitting where it's coming from. Then let progress speak, he said. She chuckled. You make it sound easy. It's not, he replied. It's just right. Late one night Asha asked if she could visit his workshop. He hesitated but agreed. When she arrived, she stopped at the doorway, taking in the cluttered space, the shelves of spare parts, the faint hum of test rigs, the framed photo of Rao on the wall. So this is where the miracle happens, she said quietly. This is where I try, he corrected. She moved closer to the photo. That's, yes, Professor Rao. Asha studied the image. He looks kind. He was. Too kind for the place that destroyed him. She looked around again. You could have gone public already. Exposed her. Why haven't you? He leaned against the table, eyes steady. Because revenge fixes nothing. Truth should heal, not wound. If I shout now, people will just hear noise. But if I let my work speak, they'll remember it. She nodded slowly. You're braver than I am. No, he said. Just tired of watching good people break. They worked side by side that night, reviewing logs, aligning patches, not saying much. Somewhere between lines of code and cups of tea, the tension of the past few weeks softened into understanding. For Asha, it was more than professional respect. It was rediscovering the reason she'd once fallen in love with technology, the belief that integrity could live inside a circuit board. Before leaving, she turned at the door. If you ever decide to step out of the shadows, I'll stand with you. He gave a small smile. Let's finish fixing the system first. By the end of that month, the company's network was the most stable it had been in years. Client confidence returned. Performance reports soared. Mira took public credit, of course, standing in front of cameras, praising her brilliant IT division, but behind the scenes, everyone knew who had made it happen. In private group chats, engineers sent messages like, "He saved the servers. She doesn't deserve him. If he ever comes back, we'll follow him." Asha didn't stop them. She didn't encourage it either. She just watched, quietly amazed at how quickly respect could spread once fear stopped choking it. That night, Naveen sat alone again, the faint glow of his monitors painting light across the old workshop walls. He reread a message from Asha that simply said, "We're steady. For the first time in years, we're steady." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had fixed machines all his life, but this was different. He was fixing people, one quiet act of trust at a time. For the first time since his mentor's death, he felt balance returning. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. A fragile kind, but real. Maybe, he thought, the truth didn't always have to crash its way in. Maybe it could slip through quietly, disguised as competence, carried by those who still believed in decency. He looked at Rayo's photo again and smiled. "We're almost there, sir," he whispered. "Almost." The hum of the machines answered back, soft and alive, like they too believed that healing, whether for circuits or for people, always began in silence. But began with an email that wasn't supposed to exist. Asha opened her inbox one morning and found a company-wide alert stamped "Urgent Security Breach Detected." The message was short and cold. Unauthorized external access traced to engineering division. Internal investigation underway. Expect temporary suspension of remote operations. She froze. The wording was careful. No names, no evidence. But the implication was clear. Someone had found the trail. Within hours, the building changed. Cameras rotated faster. Logins required new authorizations. And Mira Verma's voice echoed across every corridor like a storm warning. At home, Naveen noticed first. The private server he'd been using to route maintenance commands returned a blunt message. Access denied. Then his phone vibrated. "Asha, they're locking down everything. She knows someone's been helping. Don't respond to any corporate message." Naveen, "Too late. I'm already locked out." "Asha, stay off the grid. I'll handle this." He tried to believe her, but something inside him knew. This wasn't just a search for a leak. It was a hunt. Inside Clyratech, Mira assembled her leadership team in the glass conference room. The atmosphere was heavy, tense. Screens on the wall showed lines of audit logs, and IP traces converging toward one location, the same subnet Naveen used. "This," she said, tapping the screen, "is where our unauthorized access originated. External node, unregistered credentials, full administrative clearance." A junior manager shifted uneasily. "But ma'am, the network logs also show." "I'm not asking for theories," she snapped. "I'm asking for accountability." She turned to Asha. "You've been handling most of our system recovery. Any idea who had that level of access?" Asha hesitated. "Not without reviewing." "Review nothing," Mira cut in. "You've been too lenient already." The accusation hung in the air. For the first time, Isha saw genuine fear behind Mira's anger. Not fear of loss, but fear of exposure. That night, security agents arrived at Naveen's workshop. Not the police yet. Private investigators hired by Clyratech. They moved with rehearsed efficiency, confiscating his drives, his laptop, even the old servers that hadn't worked in years. He didn't resist. He only asked one question. "On what grounds?" The lead agent read from a printed notice. "You are under investigation for unauthorized access to proprietary networks and potential data theft." Evidence suggests you compromised internal security at Clyratech Systems. Evidence, he repeated quietly, as though testing the word's meaning. You mean the work I was asked to do? The man didn't answer. Within an hour, every trace of his project was gone. The only thing they didn't take was the photograph of Rao still hanging crooked on the wall. At Clyratech the next morning, Mira staged her performance. A company-wide meeting streamed to every department. Her tone was solemn, but righteous. Last month we faced one of the most serious breaches in our company's history, she began. After an internal investigation, we discovered that the individual responsible was the same outsider previously caught interfering with our systems. On the screen behind her appeared Naveen's photo, taken from his HR file, edited with a red overlay and the word terminated. Whispers rippled through the audience. Some looked shocked, others looked away, unwilling to meet each other's eyes. He infiltrated our architecture, extracted confidential code, and attempted to sell it through an online proxy, Mira continued. We have security footage confirming unauthorized physical access. Asha's hands clenched under the table. She knew it was a lie. The footage she had seen once showed nothing but him leaving the conference room quietly after being escorted out. Now on screen, it showed a spliced image of him typing into a console long after he'd gone. Mira ended her speech with feigned regret. We must protect our integrity. I expect complete cooperation from all departments as legal proceedings begin. The applause that followed wasn't admiration, it was obedience. Asha confronted her afterward, voice trembling but firm. You edited that footage. Mira turned, smiling thinly. Be careful, Asha. You're dangerously close to sounding insubordinate. He didn't steal anything, Asha said. He fixed what you broke. Mira's eyes hardened. And what if he did fix it? Does that give him ownership of my company? Your company? Yes, she said, leaning closer. Built by me, protected by me. No street technician will take that away. You mean Rao's company? Asha whispered. Mira froze for a second. Just a flicker. Enough to confirm the truth. You're suspended, she said coldly. Effective immediately. Security escorted Asha out before she could say another word. At home, Naveen sat in silence, the world outside his window blurred by rain. He had no devices left, no access, no defense. The news had already reached social media. Freelance engineer accused in Clyratech breach. The story was spreading fast, fueled by Mira's carefully planted leaks. The sound of footsteps pulled him back. Mira stood at the door, her face pale. Behind her, two uniformed officers waited. Mr. Naveen Rao? One of them asked. He nodded. We're here to ask about your involvement in a corporate data theft case. Do you consent to questioning? Mira stepped forward. He didn't do anything. The officer kept his tone professional. Ma'am, this is routine. We just need clarification. Naveen placed a calming hand on her shoulder. It's okay. The officers stepped inside, scanning the nearly empty room. One of them picked up a printed folder, labeled Rao Legacy. What's this? Proof, Naveen said quietly. But I doubt you'll read it. The officer flipped through the pages, lines of code, timestamps, old handwritten notes. He frowned but said nothing. We'll take these for evidence, he said finally. Mira looked at her brother, tears welling. They're turning everything upside down. He nodded slowly. That's how lies work. They start at the top and fall until they crush the honest ones. When the officers left, the house felt smaller than ever. The workshop, once full of hums and lights, was now bare. Only the faint outline of dust where his machines once sat remained, like ghosts of the work he'd loved. He sank into the chair, head in his hands. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of defeat pressing down on his chest. But under that weight, a single thought refused to die. They had taken everything, his name, his work, his peace. But not the truth. He whispered to the empty room, voice barely audible. You can't rewrite what's real. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, rattling the window. It sounded almost like applause, slow, heavy, and far away. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and exhaustion, a flicker of purpose still glowed. Weak, yes, but alive. The kind of flame that waits for the right wind. For 2 days, Naveen barely slept. The humiliation from the public firing burned in his chest. But it wasn't despair that kept him awake. It was instinct. Something in him refused to believe that this was the end. Lies could spread fast, but the truth always left traces. And if traces existed, he could find them. He sat at his stripped-down workstation, surrounded by the remnants of his old equipment. The investigators had taken most of his machines, but they'd missed one, a battered external drive he'd hidden behind a loose tile. It contained cached diagnostic data from his last remote session inside Clyratech's network. He powered it up. The light flickered once, then steadied. On screen, strings of system logs began scrolling like whispered testimony from buried witnesses. Each entry carried a signature, timestamps, command IDs, user credentials. Most were routine, but one stood out, a hidden override executed under Mira Verma's personal admin ID, time-stamped precisely during the period she'd accused him of tampering. He leaned closer. "Got you," he whispered. He needed help, someone with internal access and moral clarity. That meant Asha. She'd gone silent after her suspension, but he knew she wouldn't have stopped caring. After hours of failed calls, he sent a single message through a private relay channel they'd once used for encrypted patches. "I found proof, not just about me, about Rao. Check your old system logs under Backup Legacy Archive 03. They're masking source code ownership." "I'll wait." He didn't expect an answer, but an hour later his screen flashed. "Meet me tonight. Same cafe." The cafe was quieter now. Half the lights out, rain tapping the windows in steady rhythm. Asha was already there, hair pulled back, exhaustion etched into her face. She slid a flash drive across the table before he could speak. "I checked," she said. "You were right. The backups weren't deleted. They were hidden behind dummy directories. Mira's been falsifying reports for years. She used engineers' work, stripped their names, and filed it under her patents." Naveen opened the drive on his laptop. The data was messy but damning. Project archives stamped with different names, all rerouted to Mira's ID. Dozens of stolen designs, each one feeding the company's success. Asha pointed to one file. "This one, the oldest build in the folder. It's marked Foundational Core. Look at the embedded tag." He did. There it was again. Rao 1 Beta. His throat tightened. "That's my mentor's code. She built her empire on it. And not just his," Asha said. 5 others. Some resigned, some were paid off. One died of a heart attack the year after he was blacklisted. She didn't just steal, she erased. The words landed heavy between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Naveen said quietly, "The server from the evaluation still has the original code. She couldn't purge it, because it's integrated into the architecture. That machine is the key. If we can access it, the checksum will prove whose design it really is." Asha frowned. "The server's under lockdown. Only Mira has clearance now." "Then we use her arrogance," he said. "She's planning the investor conference this weekend, right?" Asha nodded slowly.
"Yes."
"Big event. Live demo of our self-repairing infrastructure. Her masterpiece." He smiled grimly. "Perfect. That's the same system I stabilized. It's running Rao's code underneath. If we trigger a live diagnostic during her presentation, the metadata will surface automatically. She won't be able to stop it." Asha stared at him, torn between fear and awe. That could ruin her. He met her gaze. Or free everyone she buried. They spent the next 2 nights building their plan. Asha smuggled access tokens through maintenance servers, under the guise of system testing. Naveen rerouted diagnostic protocols, embedding an automated verification script that would activate during the presentation's network stress test. Each line of code felt like an oath. Not revenge, not sabotage, justice, executed in binary and truth. But it wasn't without risk. If caught, Asha would lose her career permanently. Naveen could face real prison time. Still, neither hesitated. Some truths once seen, refused to be unlearned. On the final night, Asha called him one last time before the conference. Her voice was calm but weighted. "You can still back out." He shook his head, though she couldn't see it. "If I walk away, Ro stays erased. That's not living." She exhaled softly. "Then whatever happens tomorrow, know this. You already changed that company more than she ever did." The morning of the conference arrived bright and deceptive. The city buzzed with anticipation. News anchors praised Clyratech's innovation breakthrough. Investors filled the hall, and Mira Verma glowed under the spotlight like a queen returning to her throne. Backstage, Asha stood among technicians pretending to prepare system diagnostics. Her palms were damp, but her face stayed composed. Hidden inside the event's command queue was Naveen's script, set to activate the moment Mira ran her demo. Meanwhile, miles away, Naveen sat in his small workshop, one hand hovering over his old terminal, connected through the last surviving backdoor Asha had left him. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Mira's voice echoed through the live stream feed. "Today marks a new era of technology. an era where machines repair themselves. She gestured to the massive central server unit, the same one he had once fixed under humiliation. The room erupted in applause. Ashama typed 3 silent commands. On Naveen's screen the system came alive, green lines racing across, the diagnostic kicking in. Within seconds the code audit began displaying on the live projector. And then, there it was, the digital watermark. Original build authored, Professor Arvind Rao, independent developer. The hall went dead silent. Mira froze mid-sentence. End the demo, she hissed. Now. But it was too late. The checksum verification continued running, exposing version logs and metadata connecting her administrative account to file alterations and falsified patents. Every line projected in real time, unedible, irreversible. Backstage, Ashay's heart pounded. She could hear the murmurs rising, confusion turning to outrage. On his end, Naveen watched in silence, the reflection of Rao's name glowing softly on his screen. His mentor's legacy was alive again, truth resurrected from within the machine that once carried lies. The feed cut abruptly. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Asha's phone buzzed, a short message from him. "It's done," she replied with trembling fingers. "They'll come after us. Let them," he typed. "This time, we have the truth." Outside, the city lights shimmered faintly against the glass towers, and for the first time in years, Naveen felt the quiet hum of peace, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that simply exists. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to Rao's photo. "Your name's back where it belongs." And somewhere inside Clyratech's now compromised servers, the same line of code pulsed steadily, like a heart that refused to die. The auditorium gleamed with wealth, polished glass, velvet curtains, gold-trimmed banners announcing Clyratech, the future repairs itself. Hundreds of investors filled the rows, phones raised, anticipation buzzing like static. At the center of it all, Mira Verma stood poised in a white blazer, her confidence as sharp as the spotlights above her. Behind her, the massive projection screen displayed the words, "Live demonstration, self-healing server." "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone smooth and rehearsed, "what you're about to see today will redefine digital resilience. A system that fixes its own failures, a product years ahead anything on the market." Applause thundered through the room. Cameras flashed. She soaked it in. The validation, the illusion, the empire of stolen brilliance. From his small workshop miles away, Naveen watched the live stream in silence. The feed flickered across his battered monitor, the sound slightly delayed. His fingers hovered over his keyboard. One line of command was all it would take. One quiet keystroke to let the truth speak for itself. He whispered under his breath, "For you, sir." Then he pressed enter. On stage, Mira gestured to the towering server behind her. "This is innovation in its purest form, designed, developed and perfected under my leadership." She tapped a key on her control panel. "System, initiate self-diagnostic protocol." The machine obeyed. Lights flickered, panels shifted. Data strings appeared across the screen behind her. Investors leaned forward. The process looked flawless, until a line of code blinked onto the display that wasn't part of her prepared script. Running verification checksum. Source legacy patch. RAW 01 beta. Restored integrity detected. Mira froze mid-sentence. The line stayed there, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then another appeared beneath it. Authored by Professor Arvind Rao, Integrated System Core. Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones shot up, recording. The room, once an echo chamber of applause, now vibrated with confusion. Mira forced a tight smile. "An unexpected log. Our system traces back all code ancestry for transparency." But her voice cracked slightly on transparency. She motioned toward the technicians at the console, whispering sharply, "Remove it, now." The technician's voice trembled. "Ma'am, it's not part of the presentation. It's running on live verification mode." "Then shut it down." He shook his head helplessly. "We can't. It's locked from an external administrative key." Ashasha stood at the side of the stage among the staff, watching the panic spread. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Naveen. Phase 2 display live demo mode." Her pulse raced. She nodded subtly and entered a quick command on her tablet. Suddenly, the server's display changed. The projected interface shifted to full screen, and a live terminal window opened, its font plain, its truth undeniable. Restoration log initiated by external consultant, anonymous ID, diagnostic integrity, patch registered Rashao Naveen integration sequence. The crowd murmured louder now, investors whispering to one another, journalists scribbling furiously. And then through the side entrance a figure appeared. No fanfare, no security escort. Just a man in a simple shirt, toolkit slung over his shoulder. Mira's eyes widened. What is he doing here? He walked calmly to the edge of the stage, stopping before the audience, facing the giant display of code glowing behind her. Good morning, Naveen said, his voice steady but quiet. My name is Naveen Rao. Some of you may remember me. I was the technician you saw publicly dismissed a few weeks ago. The murmurs grew louder. Mira stepped forward, her smile brittle. Security. He raised a hand. You can call them, but before they arrive I'd like to show you something. Something that might interest your investors. He turned toward the console. This server you see here, the one you've been told can repair itself, was built on a foundation of stolen code. A legacy project authored by a man named Professor Arvind Rao. My mentor, my teacher, the one your CEO accused of theft years ago. Mira's voice sliced through the air. That's a lie. You're trespassing. He ignored her. His fingers danced across the keyboard, and the massive screen responded instantly. Lines of proof filled the projection wall. Digital signatures, timestamps, original commits. Rao's name appeared over and over again, intertwined with Clyra systems like the roots of a tree hidden under glass. This, Naveen said softly, is the real system, not built by greed, but by genius. Not claimed through force, but through patience. The silence that followed was heavy. Then one investor near the front row spoke. Can you prove this machine still works, your way? Naveen nodded. Yes, watch. He input a short string. The lights on the server dimmed, then flickered back to life, stable, seamless. A live readout appeared on screen. All nodes operational, repair complete. The same flawless performance Mira had claimed credit for, now visibly controlled by the man she had humiliated. The audience erupted in murmurs, shifting from confusion to realization. Asha stepped out from the side of the stage, finally visible. Everything you're seeing is real. These records were verified through the company's own logs. Mira Verma falsified patent data and erased multiple engineers from their own work. Mira spun toward her. You traitor. Asha's voice didn't waver. Truth isn't betrayal. Security entered, but they hesitated. No one moved toward Naveen. The crowd's attention had already turned. One of the investors, a senior board member with a commanding voice, rose from his seat. Ms. Verma, is this true? Mira's mask faltered. Of course not. This man broke into our network. Naveen interrupted, calm as a whisper. You cut the power that day, remember? You called my work guesswork. All I did was repair what you destroyed, and your system recorded every second of it. He hit enter. One last time. The feed replayed the hidden logs, video footage of the original test, showing her cutting power, overriding commands and ordering security to remove him. The truth, archived in the Simmons she thought she controlled. The audience gasped. Cameras flashed like lightning. Mira's voice cracked. This is manipulated. But her words drowned beneath the rising noise of outrage. An investor shouted, you stole from your own people. Another stood. You've built your empire on lies. Security hesitated again. Then one guard stepped forward, not toward Naveen, but toward Mira. Ma'am, he said carefully, the board's requesting you leave the stage. Her face turned pale. You can't. But they were already moving. For the first time she looked small, the power stripped from her voice, her certainty crumbling under the weight of evidence. As the guards escorted her toward the exit, the same murmurs that once laughed at Naveen now followed her like a shadow. He watched quietly, not smiling, not gloating, just finished. As she passed, she hissed under her breath. You think this makes you better? He looked at her calmly. No, just honest. She was led out through the same doors where he'd once been forced to leave in silence. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone. When the doors closed, the room stayed still for a long time. Then, slowly, applause began. Hesitant at first, then swelling into a standing ovation. Not for scandal. For truth. Asha stood beside him, eyes shining. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We did. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, Mr. Rao, will you take over the project? He smiled faintly. I don't want control, just correction. Behind him, the screen still glowed with Rao's name, pulsing like a heartbeat across the massive display. Authored by Professor Arvind Rao. Restore. The lights of the server flickered gently, humming in perfect rhythm. alive, honest, whole. And for the first time Naveen felt peace not as victory, but as alignment. The world finally reflecting what had always been true. He turned to Asha and said quietly, "Machines don't lie. People just stop listening." She nodded. "Maybe now they'll start again." He stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause, each clap echoing the sound of something greater than vindication, the sound of balance returning to a world that had forgotten how to respect the quiet ones. The days after the conference unfolded like the slow turning of dawn after a storm. News outlets swarmed the story. Clara Tech scandal exposed, CEO falsified patents, engineer redeems legacy. For once the headlines didn't exaggerate, they told the truth. The board of directors moved swiftly. Within 48 hours, Meera Verma was placed under formal investigation. Her office was sealed, her accounts frozen, and her reign built on fear and imitation crumbled into dust. And in her absence, something unexpected bloomed. Calm. Ashasha was appointed interim CEO. The announcement caught her off guard, but it didn't surprise the staff. Everyone had already seen who the real leader was long before the title arrived. The hallways that once echoed with fear now carried laughter again. Teams worked freely. New ideas sparked and trust, fragile but growing, began to return like oxygen to a room that had been sealed for years. Naveen watched it all from a distance. He declined most interviews, ignored the reporters who camped outside his small workshop, and spent his mornings exactly the same way as before, cleaning tools, repairing old machines, keeping his space alive. But one morning his phone buzzed with a message from Asha. "We're rebuilding. I want you here. Officially." He smiled when he read it. He knew this conversation was coming. Still, he typed his reply slowly. "I'll come, but not to run it." When he arrived at Clyratech again, the air felt different. No polished arrogance, no icy silence, just the low hum of people working, truly working. The same receptionist who had once looked through them now greeted him with a respectful nod. He walked the halls quietly, noticing the small changes. Transparent glass had replaced the frosted walls that once hid closed-door decisions. The boardroom lights were softer. The massive portrait of Meera that used to hang behind reception was gone. In its place was something simple, a framed quote that read, "Integrity is innovation that doesn't fear inspection." Asha met him near the server lab. Her smile was tired but real. "Feels different, doesn't it?" He nodded. "Feels human." They walked inside. The mainframe stood exactly where it had during his humiliation, but now it was surrounded by new engineers, young faces, curious, unafraid. He watched them discuss ideas without fear of being silenced. The sight filled him with a quiet pride. Asha turned to him. "The board approved my proposal. We're creating a new internal branch, the Department of Technological Ethics. It'll ensure that what happened to Rao and to you never happens again." He smiled faintly. "And you want me to lead it?" "I want you to build it," she corrected, "from scratch. Name it, shape it, run it however you believe it should be." He looked at her for a long moment. "You know I'm not a corporate man." "I don't need a corporate man," she said softly. "I need a conscience." Weeks later, the new department opened in a smaller wing of the building, a place once used for discarded equipment and forgotten storage. Naveen spent days cleaning it himself, scraping old labels off desks, rewiring outlets, and repainting the walls a warm, neutral gray. He named it the Rao Center for Ethical Technology. The plaque outside read, "For those who build in silence and serve without applause." Meera stood beside him at the opening ceremony, her eyes bright with pride. "You did it," she whispered. "You turned their mockery into a classroom." He chuckled. "Let's see if the students agree." Inside, rows of workstations filled the room. Dozens of young technicians sat ready for orientation. Some interns, some employees transferred from other departments. All curious, all hungry for something more than a paycheck. He didn't stand on a stage. He just walked to the center, rested his hands on a desk, and spoke like he would to a group of peers. "When I was younger," he began, "I thought intelligence would earn respect. But I learned something different. Intelligence without integrity just builds smarter ways to destroy trust." The room stayed silent. He continued, "Every system you build will carry a fingerprint, yours, and one day that fingerprint will either defend you or expose you. The code you write today isn't just work, it's confession. So write it in truth." A hand went up in the back. "Sir, what if the people above us don't care about truth?" He smiled gently. "Then make them care through the quality of your work. You can't control what others do, but you can control whether their lies depend on your silence. The words settled into the room like seeds. Some of the students scribbled notes. Others just nodded slowly, eyes bright with understanding. At the back, Asha watched quietly, her arms folded. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. The change she'd hoped for was already happening. By the end of the first month, the Rao Center became more than an ethics program. It became a heartbeat for the company. Teams consulted the department for transparency reviews. New engineers proposed projects openly. And slowly, Clyra Tech began to regain public respect, not through marketing but through honesty. Every week, Naveen ran mentoring sessions. He showed students how to trace code ancestry, document properly, and credit contributors no matter how small the part. His mantra became a quiet slogan that spread through the halls: "Leave no name behind." Reporters tried to label him the man who took down a CEO. He never accepted the title. He'd correct them gently every time. "I didn't take anyone down. I just lifted someone who deserved to be remembered." One evening, long after everyone had left, Naveen stayed behind, sitting alone in the empty classroom. The soft hum of computers filled the silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. Mira's handwriting still faintly visible. "Stand tall." He smiled. "I did," he whispered. He walked to the main server one last time, the same model he'd fixed all those months ago. Its surface was polished now, spotless. He tapped the console, entered a simple command, and the system booted instantly. A new banner appeared across the screen. Integrity Protocol active. Developed by Naveen Rao. He didn't mean for it to sound grand. It was just a tool, a security feature to prevent hidden edits or falsified authorship. But to him it was symbolic. The truth embedded permanently into the machine, no longer at the mercy of power. He powered it down gently, almost like tucking in a sleeping child. The next morning, Clyra Tech unveiled its rebranding campaign. No sleek taglines, no exaggerated promises. Just one statement, printed on a simple white backdrop. Rebuilt by honesty. It was signed by interim CEO Asha Khanna and ethics director Naveen Rao. The photo of them together went viral, not for glamour but for authenticity. Two people smiling, not for the camera but for the peace that comes after telling the truth. Mira Verma's name faded from the headlines within weeks. Legal cases proceeded quietly. She would never again command a stage, but the legacy she tried to steal was now permanently out of her reach. That weekend, Naveen took Mira to visit their parents' grave on the edge of the city. The sky was overcast, the air crisp. He placed a small circuit chip beside the headstone, one from the very first server he'd fixed. Mira tilted her head. "Why that?" "It belonged to the system that started everything," he said. "Broken, then rebuilt, like us." She smiled softly. "So what now?" He looked toward the horizon. "Now we build things worth trusting." They stood together in silence, the wind brushing gently against them. For the first time in years, Naveen didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on his shoulders. He felt light, unburdened but grounded. As they turned to leave, Mira slipped her arm through his. "You know," she said, "Professor Rao would have been proud." He smiled. "He already is. Every time these machines hum, I can hear him." That evening, back at the office, a group of interns stayed late to work on a new project. From the hallway, Naveen watched them, heads bent over keyboards, laughter spilling between lines of code. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. The same hum that once symbolized loneliness now sounded like music, proof that integrity once planted could multiply. He turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of monitors behind. Before walking out, he paused at the door, whispering the line he'd repeated so many times. "Machines don't lie, people just need to learn how to listen." Then he stepped into the night, the city's soft lights reflecting in his eyes, not the glimmer of ambition, but the quiet shine of peace earned through truth. 6 months later, the air inside Clyra Tech felt different. Not newer, not grander, just cleaner, honest. The lobby no longer echoed with nervous footsteps. The walls no longer carried fear. The company had found its rhythm again, quieter, steadier, real. In the innovation lab, a new display stood near the entrance. Nothing flashy, no holograms, no slogans, just a simple brass plaque mounted against the white wall. It read, "In memory of those who built in silence." Beneath it, a single name, Professor Arvind Rao. And under that, in smaller letters, his work taught us that integrity is the highest form of intelligence. That morning, before the employees arrived, Naveen entered the lab alone. He didn't announce himself. He didn't bring cameras or speeches. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the plaque. The sunlight caught the engraving, making it glow faintly as if his mentor's name was made of the very light that once guided him. He reached out and ran his fingers along the metal, tracing each letter slowly. For a long time he said nothing. Then quietly, he murmured, "You're home now, sir." Behind him, footsteps approached, soft, deliberate. Ashasha stopped beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She didn't speak either. She just handed him one, and they stood shoulder to shoulder facing the plaque together. No ceremony, no applause, just silence, the kind that feels sacred. After a moment, Asha said softly, "You know, people come here every morning before starting work. Some touch the plaque, some just stand for a few seconds. It's become a habit, like a promise." Naveen smiled faintly. "Then he's still teaching." She nodded. "And so are you." They watched the hallway lights flicker on, one by one, illuminating the new world they'd built. He didn't need to say it aloud, but both of them knew what this moment meant. The story was finally complete, not with revenge, not with triumph, but with restoration. As they turned to leave, Naveen looked back one last time. The plaque caught the light again, glowing gently in the quiet room. He felt the hum of the machines behind the wall, the same rhythm that had carried him through humiliation, doubt, and truth. Now, it wasn't noise, it was peace. In his mind, he could almost hear Rayo's voice again. "Integrity will never make you rich, but it will make you free." And for the first time, Naveen understood every word. Outside the lab, the city was just waking, sunlight spilling through the glass towers, people hurrying, car horns blaring, life moving forward, unaware that something rare had survived inside one small company: honesty. He took a deep breath, smiled at Asha, and said quietly, "Machines don't lie, and maybe people can learn again." She smiled back. "They already are." They walked out together, leaving the lab in silence, not the silence of secrecy, but the kind that follows truth once it's finally been spoken. Final narration for viewers. True strength isn't in winning applause, it's in restoring honesty where it was lost. Because every broken system, every silenced voice, can be repaired by those who still believe in integrity. Tell us where you're watching from, and one word that describes how this story made you feel.